Welcome to the Handcrafted Podcast, the business of making things. I'm Paul, founder of Philadelphia Table Company and the Handcrafted Network, and I believe great craftsmanship deserves great business strategy. This podcast is for makers who want to build not just great products, but a thriving business. Each episode will dive into the mindset, systems, and skills that turn craft into success. All right, guys, what's up? Hope everybody's been doing great. Welcome back to the Handcrafted Podcast. Thanks so much for listening, for tuning in, checking it out, for subscribing, for sharing, all of those sorts of things. Like I say every week, it's awesome to get to do this and realize that people are listening, which is pretty cool. When I started this, it was just kind of, who knows what's going to happen with it, but it's been great. So for those of you guys who have reached out to me and connected to me, it's been great getting to know you. For those of you who have not yet, I look forward to when that time comes. So with that said, I will be presenting a few seminars in person at the Texas Woodworking Festival. That is September 25th to the 27th in Austin, Texas. I will be there for the whole weekend. So if you're going to be in town or you're going to be going, send me an email. Would love to connect with you. Paul at thehandcraftednetwork.com. Would love to say hi and figure out a way that we could sort of connect and meet. You could also check out the schedule online and see which sorts of topics I'm presenting on. And yeah, I'm presenting each of those 3 days. So would be really, really great to see you. Also, with that said, this podcast is brought to you, as you know, the Handcrafted Network. It's an online community of makers that are professional and semi-professional, and it's a really great place to sort of ask questions, connect, answer some of those things. And one thing, and I was talking to Jim, our marketing person, about it this week, which was one of the things that we do in the group is sort of like you come to us with the questions and we sort of help. But with that said, it doesn't have to work that way necessarily. If you're having problems with marketing, if you're having problems with selling, if you're having problems with systems and processes, all of those different unique things, we have modules for all that stuff. There's online classroom sections. You will set up a time for a call with me and you'll get to view sort of, and I'll kind of talk you through the different classroom things, point you in the right direction, connect you with all the right places to go for all of that. For those of you guys who did join or take advantage of the free trial opportunity, it's been great getting to know you guys. We've had some people from other different fields, not just woodworking, so it's been really cool connecting and learning about those other fields, such as like leather and painting and ceramics and all of that sort of stuff. It's been really great. And everybody I've talked to actually has said, who wasn't woodworkers, actually said, hey, this is pretty interesting how relevant these sort of worlds are. So it's cool to sort of mix all the makers into one bucket. All right, so with that said, today I want to talk about how to make your business better. I know, it's a huge, vague thing, but how do you make it so your business is the business that people come to and is the business that people choose to work with? So there's been a few things. I'm gonna reference a few different books and a few different ideas of what I've been sort of thinking about. So Will Garda, who did Unreasonable Hospitality, I've done a few podcasts on that, has always looked at sort of like outside the box things. How do you make your business better? How do you make, for him, it was how does he make his restaurant better? How does he make it so that his restaurant is the best? So one of the things that he did was didn't focus on the actual thing, right? So it's not like, I mean, to me, the benchmark, like the bare minimum to get in. So if you're doing a restaurant, the bare minimum to get in is to have an amazing food, right? You can only make the food so incredibly good, right? If you're comparing up against other Michelin stars, and for those of you guys who don't know, Will Garda has a few Michelin star restaurants and kind of talks about 11 Madison Park specifically in the book. So he's talking about how to make a better restaurant or restaurant experience, how to grow this thing, how to get it off the ground. And he was very smart, and he talks about this in the book, so I do recommend Unreasonable Hospitality. So he talks about how it's about looking at the things that nobody else is sort of looking at. So one of the things that he did was he took his entire restaurant staff to other Michelin star restaurants, other things out there. And he didn't ask them, hey, what are the things that stood out to you? What are the things that were amazing to you? He said, what were the trouble spots? What were the things that you didn't think were super great? What were the things that could possibly be better? And, you know, two of those things, one of them was all of his employees were like, hey, the coffee kind of sucks here. The food's amazing, experience is great, but the coffee just isn't great. So Will wrote that down. Another thing that some people said was like, they sort of treat people not well who are ordering beers instead of wines. They treat the people ordering wine as sort of like a little bit better and are sort of snobby to the people who are serving beers. So he goes, okay, cool, check. So he took these ideas back to his restaurant and was like, hey, so if everyone else has crappy coffee, let's make ours the best coffee. And if everybody else kind of doesn't really respect beer drinkers, let's have a beer sommelier. So he did those things, which were sort of this X factor outside of the box things, right? So on surface level, if you're trying to make a better restaurant, you're obviously going to look at it and be like, I just need to make the best food better. My food just isn't good enough. But what he did was he said, hey, that's the assumption. The food has to be good. But after that, there's a whole bunch of other things around it. And I think that is very similar in our fields, like of us that make things. Another example, and I'm going to talk about how this sort of comes back around to sort of the craft, I was thinking about was Uber versus sort of taxi. So before Uber came out, like taxi was annoying. Taxi was like, you had to call a number, you didn't know if they were available, you had to flag them down, they were uncomfortable, you couldn't schedule them ahead of time, all of that sort of stuff. But at the time, for people who wanted to create a better taxi, they probably would have done the things that, you know, I was saying about somebody trying to make a restaurant better. They would have said, hey, let's make, you know, the cars go faster. Let's put more cars out. Let's, make, do these other different things, make the taxis fit more people. But what they weren't really looking at is what were the things on the outside of the box? What were those things that I just said that people weren't really happy about? They weren't happy about the fact that you couldn't get it on demand. They weren't happy about you couldn't pre-schedule it. They weren't happy about sort of being able to know where this particular taxi or this car is. So in the early days of the Uber app, and they now do it now too, which was you could schedule a car and you see the car driving around. That's mind-blowing for the taxi world. And a lot of people actually pushed back and had kind of early critiques of the Uber situation. But what was happening is people weren't noticing that, like, instead of improving the taxi, they just kind of went full sidebar. They went something completely different. And another example of this too that I often think about is like when the car was invented. It was, we need to get from point A to point B better, right? So what they could have done is they could have just made a better horse and carriage, right? Maybe put more horses on, make a larger carriage, make larger wheels, so do all of this stuff. But what happened was they were smart enough to then say, no, we need something that is completely different. That's a sidebar to that. So how does this come back to the world of craft, and how does that come back to like what we're doing? So I'm going to talk about tables, obviously, because that's what we do, and furniture, but it could obviously apply to you as well. So for me, it's not necessarily about building better furniture. It's not building better tables. I don't know if our tables are better than anybody else's out there, but for me, that's kind of like the barrier to entry. If our tables weren't great and our tables weren't outstanding and our furniture wasn't outstanding, then we wouldn't be in business anyway. So to me, that's the bar, that's the baseline. And from there, what do you do? What can you expand upon that makes things better? That makes, as Will Garda would say, Unreasonable Hospitality is a little bit more about the experience. What are these sort of X factor intangibles that other people aren't willing to do or aren't doing? So one of those things for us recently, just to kind of fill you in and give a real life example, is we do a lot of deliveries across country. We've been working with a white glove delivery company that actually I was going to ask to sponsor this podcast, but I've since reversed on that. Has been really dropping the ball on us. It was pitched to us as a really luxury experience. White glove experience is great. And for us, delivery is a really important part of it. If somebody's spending $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 on a table, the last thing they want to do is like open a crate, open a box, leave the crate on the thing. So like what's happening is, to me, that's like dropping the ball on the, right at the end, right before you get into the end zone. Like you're just not getting it there. You're not finishing the whole thing. So for me, I care a ton about, and in general, the furniture delivery experience kind of does suck. Like, it's not great where it's like they give you certain windows, they, pull up in this big truck and you have to coordinate and all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, so this is just a small piece of what we're doing. And like I said, it's just kind of one example of something. So recently the White Glove delivery company has been kind of screwing up the deliveries. They dropped a few pieces, they broke a few pieces. And what's happening is it's now cycling back to us, even though it's like a third party company and our customers know that. It's still coming back to, like, we got an email the other day that was like, hey, actually, I'm really excited for the table. I really love the table, but I don't know if I want to wait for this repair to be done. Can you just give me like a refund on it? And that's killing me because the product, we couldn't have solved this problem by making a better table, by making a better furniture piece, right? What's happening is the ball's getting dropped along the way. And so when I started the company, we used to deliver everything by hand. And to me, that was such a special part of the process. That was the X factor that I think a lot of people aren't really doing very well, and a place for us to improve on. So we then needed to expand. So we tried to find a white glove delivery company. So right now we're going back to the drawing board, figuring out, hey, how do we improve this experience again? How do we make this a huge part of what we do at Philadelphia Table Company? And like I talked about in the last podcast, how is your level of craft shown throughout the entire process? Everything from first initial sales call or email to final delivery. If you're dropping the ball in any one of those buckets or any one of those spots, it's ruining the entire name of the brand or the company or whatever it is that you're trying to build. And I think sometimes we get so focused on building the product that we forget to ask ourselves, what are the intangible things? What are the things that are outside of it, and what are the things that other people aren't doing or aren't willing to do? And again, for us, another part of that was like custom furniture. For us is like actually doing custom things that are like made and doing the shop drawings and all that sort of stuff. So I think one thing, and again, like I always say on this podcast, I try to leave you with questions to reflect upon, not necessarily answers, but I think the question you should ask yourself is, aside from improving the actual product, the actual thing that I'm making, what other step are you able to improve that's going to make the business so much better? What are the things that your competitors aren't willing to do? What are the things that other people aren't thinking about, right? Taxi would have never came up with the idea of an app and like people following it around, because somebody was able to look at it from the outside and create a whole new world around this, to the point that Uber basically is Taxi now, right? Uber and Lyft is what basically that is. And with Will, back to Unreasonable Hospitality, what he was able to do was just make the littlest thing that everyone overlooked. All these other restaurants like, hey, we'll just make a big vat of coffee and it's fine. Will goes, no, we're going to make the best coffee, so this way it's also part of the experience. So trying to figure out what these little tweaks are you can do within your business. I love to brainstorm these ideas with people. I think they're super fun. So if you're interested in brainstorming with me, paul@thehandcraftednetwork.com, you can send me an email there and we can get in touch. All right, guys, hopefully this one was helpful. Hopefully it leaves you thinking about something through the week. Hopefully it leaves you something to sort of like ruminate on as you build this thing, maybe as you're sanding or as you're cutting your fabric or like going through the process. I kind of want you throughout the week to think about, what are these sort of outside things that I can improve aside from improving the actual product. All right, guys, I will catch you next week. Have a great one, and peace.